800 hours local time. The gray sky above the icy seas of Greenland was torn apart by the roar of jet engines as the U.S. Navy's Second Fleet shifted to its highest state of combat readiness. A shocking, insane event that defied all global intelligence predictions was unfolding before our eyes. French President Emmanuel Macron, in an uncontrollable fit of rage, ordered the French Navy's trump card, the nuclear aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle, to lead a powerful Carrier Strike Group (CSG) straight into the U.S. military exclusion zone. The goal is to use military force to send a strong message to the U.S. that Washington's ambition to unilaterally control this strategic island has become too aggressive and unacceptable. The U.S., under President Trump's tough second term, is certainly not going to sit idly by and be threatened in its own backyard. As soon as the NORAD early warning radar system detected the French fleet signal, the U.S. Navy's Second Fleet, spearheaded by the supercarrier USS Gerald R, immediately went on general quarters and raced to intercept the French fleet with a show of force. Tensions escalated to the extreme. But just as the world seemed poised to witness a civil war between the two oldest Western allies, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt stepped up to the podium and poured cold water on Paris's aggression with a cold, cryptic statement. "I don't think European soldiers can influence the U.S. president's decision-making process or have any impact on his goal of controlling Greenland." But immediately after that seemingly arrogant statement, a surprise occurred that even the most imaginative people in the Kremlin could not have anticipated. Instead of celebrating NATO's fracture, the Russian General Staff had to sound red alert across the entire Northern Fleet Command. Why would a civil war between the US and France cause Russia to panic to the point of ordering its nuclear submarines to execute an emergency withdrawal? Did Russian radar detect something even more terrifying than an aircraft carrier fleet? Or are we all being deceived by the largest military illusion of the 21st century? The truth behind this fleet is far more bizarre and sophisticated than you might imagine, and it begins with a deadly arrogance. The Arctic Ocean was churning as France's Charles de Gaulle Carrier Strike Group openly entered the Davis Strait with unprecedented aggression. U.S. electronic surveillance noted that the French fleet made no attempt to conceal its formation, operating its PAMS fire control radar at maximum power and continuously scanning U.S. defense positions on Greenland. The engines of Rafale-M fighter jets roared in the sky, performing provocative flybys right in front of U.S. early warning radar stations. This was a show of force at the highest level, a risky move by Macron to force Washington to concede. France wants to prove that without European consensus, the U.S. will never have peace in the Arctic. But even more frightening than the aggression is the unusual noise of this fleet. Instead of moving in MCON emissions control to ensure safety, French warships continuously transmit wideband radio signals and activate active sonar systems, pounding the seabed with huge acoustic hammers. To military observers, this action is like a madman screaming on the battlefield. But in the eyes of those hiding beneath the ocean, this noise is a perfect shield. Russia, lurking on the fringes of the conflict, sees this chaos as a once-in-a-thousand-years opportunity to carry out the most audacious invasion in history. But before continuing, let's take a little bet. In this battle and these freezing conditions, which side will prevail, France or the U.S.? Comment with your opinion. In response to France, Washington's reaction was cold and ruthless. Ms. Caroline Leavitt's statement that European soldiers cannot influence was not just a diplomatic blow, it was a direct combat order to U.S. Northcom. Immediately, the U.S. Navy's Second Fleet deployed an encircling formation centered on the supercarrier USS Gerald R, a $13 billion behemoth equipped with the world's most advanced electromagnetic launch system, EMASS. From the deck of the USS Gerald R, a squadron of EA-18 Growler electronic warfare aircraft took off simultaneously, carrying the latest generation of ALQ-9 jamming pods, creating a huge jamming screen covering the entire area of operation of the French fleet. In an instant, the entire electromagnetic spectrum in the South Greenland region was burned out. The U.S. activated noise barrage mode, bombarding all communication and radar frequencies with white noise. The screens of Russian and neutral country surveillance stations were immediately blanked out, and all satellite signals were cut off. The U.S. was turning this area into an information black hole where no one could see or hear anything without permission from the Pentagon. The escalation did not stop there. The U.S. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers charged straight into the French formation, performing dangerous head-on maneuvers at 30 knots. The waves crashed violently, and the 5-inch gun barrels rotated continuously, locking onto each other's targets. A feeling of suffocation enveloped every sailor on board. Underwater, the situation was even more chaotic. Both the U.S. and France simultaneously activated their active sonar, creating a hellish acoustic environment. The sound waves collided with the underwater cliffs and icebergs, creating millions of false echoes. This chaos was the environmental condition that Russia's Northern Fleet had been waiting for over 2 decades to deploy its trump card. Taking advantage of NATO's chaotic activity, stirring up the entire sea area, Russia's Northern Fleet admiral ordered 2 deep-sea monsters to launch. The Yasen-M class nuclear attack submarines named Kazan and Novosibirsk left their ambush positions and plunged into the chaotic area. These are the quietest submarines in the world, dubbed ocean black holes, carrying Zircon hypersonic missiles capable of flattening Washington in 5 minutes. Russia's plan is extremely sophisticated, using the chaotic noise from the US-French confrontation as acoustic camouflage to slip through the GI-UK gap and penetrate deep into the Atlantic Ocean undetected. The ultimate goal is to bring the Zircon hypersonic cruise missiles within range to threaten the US East Coast. At 1200 hours on January 18th, Russian reconnaissance satellites reported to Moscow that their submarine formation was moving smoothly, using the noise from French aircraft carriers to conceal the sound of their pump jet propulsion. The captain of the Kazan ordered an increase in speed to 20 knots, a reckless but necessary speed to get through the blockade as quickly as possible. He believed he was pulling off the con of the century, making NATO look like fools on their own turf. But they made a fatal mistake. The noise they were relying on to hide was actually a death knell composed just for them. At exactly 1530 hours, the battlefield situation changed so rapidly that Russian electronic warfare officers were unable to react. On the Link 16 tactical data link system, the French fleet's encrypted frequencies suddenly synchronized completely with the US Navy's NIFC-CA Naval Integrated Fire Control System. In reality, there was no civil war. All that grandiose military deployment was just a carefully orchestrated grand drama with a single purpose: to lure the Russian submarine fleet out of its lair. The US and France understood that Russia's Yasen-M class submarines were so advanced that they were virtually invisible to conventional passive anti-submarine methods. To catch them, they had to be forced to move quickly and into a predetermined route. The French fleet's noisy movement and frenzied active sonar emissions were actually a trap. The terrible noise on the surface forced the Russian submarines to dive deeper and search for rare quiet corridors to hide it. But Russia did not expect that these quiet corridors were actually death traps that the US had set. And this is when the truth about the small force was revealed. The press reported that France had sent only 15 combat specialists, but in reality, these 15 soldiers were the most dangerous weapons of the campaign. They were not ordinary infantry, but a special forces team for underwater acoustic warfare, secretly dropped by American helicopters onto ice floes along the Russian ship's planned route. These 15 soldiers drilled holes through the thick ice and dropped down high-sensitivity passive hydrophones. When the Russian submarines accelerated to seize the opportunity to pass through the GI-UK gap, the sound of their pump jet propulsion, though very small, echoed like thunder in the ears of the French experts. The exact coordinates of the 2 Yasen-M submarines were immediately relayed to the Naval Operations Center of the Second Fleet. The prey had walked right into the trap. The moment of punishment came at 1600 hours. The US-French coalition decided to end the drama, breaking the backbone of the Northern Fleet on the spot without firing a single shot. 3 US Arleigh-Burke-class destroyers and a French Horizon-class frigate simultaneously turned their bows, aimed their active sonar transducers directly at the hull of the Russian submarine at extremely close range, and activated active ping mode at maximum power. In the sound-conducting environment of water, this attack created tremendous physical pressure. The sound waves hit the Russian submarine's steel hull with an intensity of up to 240 decibels, creating violent resonance and shaking like an earthquake. Inside the Kazan and Novosibirsk submarines, hell broke loose. Russian sailors clutched their heads in pain as their eardrums were assaulted by the piercing sound that penetrated the hull. Russia's sophisticated electronic systems and sonar sensors were burned out due to input signal overload. Not stopping there, the American P-8A Poseidon anti-submarine aircraft skimmed over the waves, dropping 4